I'm just going to introduce Denboy, and then we'll do a quick go around and introduce ourselves. Okay, so Denboy is a PhD candidate in the Department of Anthropology here at Memorial. His research interests include labor migration, land reforms, and food security in Southern Africa. And through his PhD, he's seeking to contribute to academic knowledge on labor migration within the Southern Africa region, with a particular focus on Zimbabwean migrants engaged in precarious farm work. His PhD research builds on ethnographic fieldwork he conducted in the Limpopo province of South Africa as part of an MPhil research project at the Institute for Poverty, Land and Agrarian Studies, and that enabled him to understand the experiences of undocumented Zimbabwean migrants as they move into, within, and out of the South African farm labor market. So let's do a quick go around. So I'm Barb-Niche. I think everybody knows me.
Peter Sinclair. I used to be in the sociology department here, and I still have a link to it.
And you're a co-investigator on The Move.
Oh, that's true.
I'm Julian. I'm a PhD student in the department of.
Okay.
Colonial. I work communications for On the Move.
Lincoln Addison. I'm a professor in the Department of Anthropology.
Denboy.
Okay, so Catherine, can you hear Denboy?
I can, as long as he speaks up, it's good.
Okay, and do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, I'm Catherine Appel from the University of Ottawa in Occupational Health and Safety Law, and I'm a member of the On the Move team.
Okay, you're up.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to say a bit about my work and what I think about the vulnerabilities among mobile workers in Southern Africa. So just to start, I thought of summarizing this presentation in graphic form. So what we see in Southern Africa, this is a picture that I was sent by someone from Zimbabwe recently, which is showing, they say it's a queue for passport photos, so passports in general. And what we are also getting from the media is news about the failure by the Zimbabwean government to process traveling documents for citizens. But also, as we move down to South Africa, these are some of the photos and graphics that we are seeing as people are trying to get into the South African labor market. So this is just a picture that I pulled out from the internet where people are trying to get into South Africa through unregulated entry routes. And we also hear of the news that Zimbabweans are being forced to pay bribes to migration officers as they try to also cross the border into South Africa. But again, as they get into South Africa, we hear news about deportations where Zimbabweans are being sent back because they don't have the required legal documents. But on the other side, the African side, the South African side, they are also crying about spending a lot of money deporting illegal migrants, while at the same time, we are also seeing policy developments in terms of bilateral agreements being agreed and also being negotiated between South Africa and Zimbabwe. So this is the overall picture of my presentation. But in particular, I'm going to look at a brief background of mobility for agriculture work within the Southern Africa, and looking at how capitalist expansion influenced contemporary labor migration regimes. And then I will look at the trend that we have seen recently between Zimbabwe and South Africa, particularly after the colonial liberation wars and after South Africa got independence from apartheid in 1994. So I will look at the factors that are pushing people to move to South Africa, some of the challenges that they are facing, and specifically what the Zimbabwean migrants' experiences have been in the South African labor market. Then we'll also talk about some of the policy responses that have been put forward by both Zimbabwe and South Africa. And I will end by a brief conclusion, putting forward my own thinking about the future of labor migration in Southern Africa. So as a background, I just want to briefly talk about how a European capitalist expansion gave rise to dislocations among Africans who initially survived on subsistence forms, including peasantry, hunting. They also had a nomadic life. So as settlers came in, we then saw Africans being restricted in terms of movement, but also they became increasingly being integrated into the wage economy. But within that wage economy, division of labor was based on race, where Africans were relegated to physical and unskilled work, while the skilled jobs were reserved for white settlers. So this is just a brief background about the colonial situation. And as Southern African governments got independence, I think they all inherited this system of a racialized labor regime. So I now move on to talk about having inherited that racialized labor regime. What does it mean in terms of contemporary movement between Zimbabwe and South Africa? What have been the main push factors, and also what has been the experiences of Zimbabweans? So Zimbabwe and South Africa had always had a tie in terms of labor exchange, and the trend has always been towards South Africa because, unlike Zimbabwe, South Africa have a relatively well-developed mining sector. They also have a well-developed agricultural sector as well as a manufacturing sector. So mobility has been towards South Africa instead of moving up to Zimbabwe. What we see is that when South Africa got independence in 1994, there was an easy in terms of mobility across borders. Borders became a bit more open for mobility. Workers could now move across borders, and also the racialized system of migration tended to be restricted. What of interest to me is the post-2000 era, especially for Zimbabwe, because this is when we got a bit of extreme developments in Zimbabwe, politically, economically, and socially. And the main feature of that period was a drastic performance of our economy, our politic, which then drove many people down south. And I just showed the one picture on the right, which is showing some of the economic challenges that we faced during that period from 2000. So that was actually a very hyperinflationary period. So my interest is to discuss then some of the vulnerabilities that Zimbabweans post-2000 are facing as they migrate down to South Africa. And in order to achieve that, I will discuss three forms of vulnerability, which I'm calling the layers of vulnerability here. But before I do that, I just want to show that to show the extent of migration between Zimbabwe and South Africa, where it is estimated that at least 3 million Zimbabweans are living and working in South Africa. And many of the migrants who are undocumented actually living in northern parts of South Africa. So this is the South Africa-Zimbabwe border. So many Zimbabweans are actually working and living in plantations around the northern part, which is the Limpopo province here. But also because of its adjacency to the Zimbabwean border, many migrants use the plantation labor market as a stepping stone to move down to other provinces and other sectors southwards. So having said that, I now turn to some of the vulnerabilities that are observed as Zimbabweans prepare and engage in labor migration down south. And I will start here with the pressures that they face at home. I have already alluded to some of the economic hardships, but most notably, since the year 2000, we have had drastic closures of the manufacturing industry. Also farm invasions, which led to loss of employment. In addition to that, we have also had high inflation, and because the industry is not performing, the economy is sort of changed to being informalized. So that's the main economic hardships that Zimbabweans are facing currently. Then there are also institutional challenges which have to do with the government performance in general. And one of the major challenges that we have that influence mobility across borders is the failure by the government to process traveling documents in time. So you would find that a passport that is supposed to be out within 3 months is taking more than 6 months or even 8 months. While that is a problem, we also have a lack of government initiative to provide safety nets for its citizens. So we have unemployment, we have inflation, people are losing livelihoods, but the government has not done enough to provide safety nets to its vulnerable citizens. Then the other set of challenges that I want to discuss about is the political challenges. I think it has been a general news item that there had been violent farm inventions in Zimbabwe, which led to secession of former settler farmers from the country, some into South Africa, but some into Mozambique and other neighboring countries. We have also had political violence since 2000, and that has been because there have been contested election results, which has led to social instability. As a result of these challenges, what we've seen then is a massive exodus of Zimbabwean citizens from their own country into neighboring countries. So it's estimated that at least a third is out of Zimbabweans is out of the country, and majority are living in South Africa. And because the plantations are so near to the Zimbabwean border, you would find that most of the undocumented Zimbabweans who are crossing the border into South Africa are actually working as plantation workers, mainly because it's easier to find work in the plantations, but also because of the distance involved in terms of traveling into South Africa. So this then presents a challenge in terms of Zimbabweans being able to maintain a decent status of living in their own country. And because of the economic, institutional, and political challenges, there have been quite a number of people moving out of the country. So what happens when they move out? I'm now talking about the process of some of the challenges that they face when they engage in their adventurous migration activities. There have been a number of researches about the risks that Zimbabweans face. So here I've just highlighted some of them, particularly the most important ones. Extortions by border authorities. I think in my first slide I showed some of the media articles which are coming out where Zimbabweans are said to being forced to pay bribes to migration officers, but also there have been sexual and physical attacks by border patrol gangs because some migrants who do not have the proper documents are forced to use unregulated entry points. So there have been instances of border patrol gangs along the border who physically and sexually abuse migrants. But then as they also cross the Limpopo River, there are risks of being attacked by crocodiles and other wild animals. Being arrested and apprehended by the police has also been a major challenge that they faced. I'm just sorry it's not coming out well there, but it's just one lady that I talked to in 2016 who was saying that who was telling me about her experience crossing the border, where she was saying that she didn't know that there were organized syndicates along the border who facilitate entry into South Africa. So these are some of the entry routes that people are using, particularly those who don't have traveling documents. The main reason why people don't have traveling documents, of course, is the economic factors, but particularly the exorbitant fees that are being charged to access work. In last year, the price to obtain an ordinary passport was $50, $50 US. And that amount is actually not affordable to many people, especially those who have never been engaged in formal work, and also mostly for young migrants who are just coming out of school. And then I talked about the processing time, where a passport that is supposed to take 3 months, an ordinary passport, is usually taking 6 months and above. So those challenges of accessing traveling documents push migrants to use illegal entry routes into South Africa. But again, some feel that they don't even need the passport. Why would they need a passport when they can easily get a job when they cross the border? So these are some of the dynamics that we face, especially among undocumented migrants getting into South Africa. So having said that, I now move to the third layer of vulnerabilities that I want to talk about. What is happening to Zimbabweans as they get into the farms, as they get into South Africa? So for most Zimbabweans, they perceive their success in crossing the border as a risk-cutting measure. So the risks that they associate with staying at home are actually much more than having to cross the border. So as soon as they get onto the farms, they view their risk scale as having been minimized, mostly because they can easily find jobs as seasonal workers. But the main challenges that they get on the farms are linked to their desperation as undocumented Zimbabweans, and also the desperation to find some form of waged work. So as a result of that desperation, they are pushed to accept minimum wages on the plantations. But generally, within South Africa, the living and working conditions on the plantations are very poor. So this is the labor market that they are getting into when they cross the border. Then another element is that because of their illegal status and because of the persistent fear of being apprehended, of being detected, they are constrained in terms of accessing social services outside the agricultural labor market, including healthcare, legal support, and even from seeking better employment opportunities. And also because the plantations are very isolated in terms of distance, that presents a challenge to accessing services and also limits migrants' ability to integrate within the community. But one important challenge that they also face is access to legal protection. They cannot move out to report cases of abuse because if they do so, they fear that they become apprehended. They fear that they get deported back to Zimbabwe. And another factor is the nature of their contracts. Because mostly they are employed as seasonal workers, they see it not as a reason to mobilize and also engage in collective bargaining. And some, above all, are not even aware of their legal rights because some are just stepping into the market and going southwards to other provinces, so they don't even worry much about learning and understanding the legal rights within the plantations. But even if they are aware, there are always reminded of cases where police have rounded up even those documented, deported them, extorted money from them. So in general, it's a challenge that they continuously face despite being illegal, or even when they are legal migrants. So, having talked of these challenges, I want to discuss about some of the policy measures that have been put in place by the South African and Zimbabwean governments to try to regulate the mobility of Zimbabweans into the South African labor market. So the first facility that I want to talk about is the B117 permits, which were actually a provision in the Aliens Control Act of 1991. And this permit facility was actually offered as a special arrangement to growers in northern provinces of South Africa, where migrant Zimbabweans would be issued with a special permit which allowed them to stay and work only with one farm. So the issuing of this permit was an attempt to regularize the stay and working of undocumented Zimbabweans who had been living in South Africa for some time. But then the challenge was even when Zimbabweans could use these permits as proof of legality, at times they would be rounded up by police and deported back. So by 2005, there had been a lot of discussions and a lot of concerns about the B117 permits, and eventually it was terminated. Then after that, there came the corporate permit system. Which worked almost the same as the B117 permit, but it was a bit modified to allow corporate entities, including the plantations, manufacturing, and mining groups, to apply through the Department of Home Affairs to employ a predetermined number of migrants. But they could only do that when they provide evidence that they couldn't find suitable workforce within South Africa. So because there were bureaucratic processes that were required to be undertaken, including registration, expenses like the registration fees, most plantation owners decided not to use the corporate payment scheme. So you'd find that most, in many cases, Zimbabweans continued to work in South Africa undocumented, even that if that facility was available. So the scheme was eventually terminated in 2009, following concerns of abuse and not being adhered to. During that period, 2009-2008, that's when we also had an increase in the number of Zimbabweans who were crossing into South Africa, following the political violence which happened in Zimbabwe in 2008, and also that was the time of extreme hyperinflation. So between 2009 and 2010, the South African government and Zimbabwean government agreed on a labor regulated scheme, the Dispensation of Zimbabweans project. But what this scheme did was it was going to document Zimbabweans who had been living in South Africa illegally. So it was targeting Zimbabweans who were already in South Africa. And through the scheme, the South African government waived some of the restrictive work permit application requirements so that it could be easy for Zimbabweans to apply for work permits. But even when we talk about over 3 million Zimbabweans in South Africa, only slightly more than 290,000 actually applied for the facility. And out of those applications, 242,000 were approved by the South African government, while the rest were rejected or they could not be finalized. There have been many speculations about why the scheme failed and why many Zimbabweans could not register for the scheme. And some of the speculations were around suspicion that it was a ploy to deport them. I guess it was because information had not been effectively delivered to the Zimbabwean migrants. But also because that scheme required the applicants to have traveling documents, which they could get from the Zimbabwean consulate in South Africa. This process was not also very effective because Zimbabwe was facing its own challenges. But some were not even aware of the facility, especially those in the plantations because of the geographic isolation. They were not made aware that such facility had taken place. So after this, in 2015, the scheme was modified a bit into the Zimbabwe Special Dispensation Permit. But the problem with this, especially these two schemes, the 2015 and 2018 one, they were only catering for Zimbabweans who had benefited from the TZP. So these two other facilities were meant to extend the stay of Zimbabweans who had applied or who had benefited from the TZP program. So what it means is no new applicants could be accommodated, and it actually meant that most undocumented workers who mostly work in the plantations could not qualify for these two schemes. So the last one, the Zimbabwe exemption permit, was instituted in 2018, and I guess it's still in place. So largely, what these schemes have failed to do is to contextualize the situation of undocumented farm workers. And as a result, their implementation did not consider the unique needs of the undocumented workers, especially those who were pushed into South Africa by economic challenges. Having failed to qualify for the labor recruitment schemes, Zimbabwean workers themselves have also taken their own initiatives to sustain their stay in South Africa. So what we've seen is an emergence of complicated networks where, among Zimbabweans already engaged in agricultural work. So these networks are used to facilitate recruitment, and also they are used to facilitate mobility within the agricultural market. And you'll find that even these networks extend beyond the farms to even other sectors where they facilitate mobility down south, and also the movement of new recruits from Zimbabwe into South Africa. Almost daily we hear about forging of citizenship documents as a way that Zimbabweans have adopted to legalize themselves within the precarious work environment. So they are forging passports, they are also forging work permits. When I was in South Africa in 2016, I actually bought a taxi with one lady who told me that she had changed her name, so she had assumed a South African name and got a South African passport. She still maintains a Zimbabwean name and identity. When she comes back to Zimbabwe, she uses a Zimbabwean name, but when she's in South Africa, she's known by another name. So those are some of the responses that we are observing among Zimbabweans in South Africa. But of course, there's also the issue of using the farms as a hiding place while they are also maximizing their incomes. So on one hand, most Zimbabweans who are working on farms do not want to be seen or do not want to engage with communities outside the labor market, because if they are detected by law agencies and deported back, it means that they've lost their incomes. So they would rather stay within the confines of the plantations, work under harsh conditions, while at the same time they are earning a bit of income that they can remit to their families back in Zimbabwe. I just want to, this is a lady that I also talked to in 2016, just to show how the plantations are a source of livelihood and how they are contributing to the livelihoods of Zimbabweans, their families back home. So here she said that after she had divorced with her husband, she worked as a housemaid with the wage that she got, which could not sustain her and her children. So because of farm work, she's now being able to support the family. She's now being able to save a few rands that she sends back home. So the South African agriculture labor market has its own challenges, but it is actually contributing to much of the livelihoods of Zimbabweans. And I guess that's why most Zimbabweans are moving down to seek employment. But then the question that we should ask is, are Zimbabweans not contributing to the economy of South Africa? Their labor is needed, but what we have seen is the migrants themselves are being criminalized. So that's a challenge that we currently have, and in my next slide, that's why what I'm proposing, that probably we can address this. So the reality is that the South African agricultural labor market has become very casualized, and because of that, it is now less appealing to the local workforce. So they are benefiting from Zimbabwean migrants. While that is the case, in Zimbabwe, there is no guarantee that the socioeconomic and political situation will change for the better anytime soon. So that's a complex situation that we are facing. Zimbabwe is continuously sending out citizens, while on the other side, South Africa is deporting and sending back and criminalizing the Zimbabweans who are working on the plantations. And as a result, it seems to me that there is no clear policy measure that has been agreed by South Africa and Zimbabwe. So my argument would be, it would be better to have a bilateral agricultural workers recruitment program, which is based on relieving potential workers of the passport and work visa burden that they currently face. And that approach, to me, I think it would achieve 4 basic things. One, it will reduce the cost that is associated with policing the border. Because right now, border immigration officers, the police, the army are up in arms with the Zimbabwean migrants who are trying to cross the border into South Africa. So my hope is that if we agree on that recruitment scheme, it will ease the job of policing the border. Then I think that if such a scheme is agreed upon, it will also reduce some of the vulnerabilities that undocumented Zimbabweans face, including the attacks that they face when they go through unregulated points, and also the burden of bribery that they are supposed to carry when they try to cross the border into South Africa. Such scheme would also improve labor practices in South Africa. How it will do that is by enhancing or allowing the migrants to report cases of human rights infringements. Because currently, if one's rights are violated, they are not able to report to the police, they are not able to report to relevant authorities, because doing so would mean that the person is losing his or her job, and also the risk of getting out of the farms. They can be detected, they can be apprehended and deported back to Zimbabwe. But lastly, I think that by having a systematized recruitment system, we are also enhancing efficiency in agricultural production. Why? Because imagine a roundup in a farm compound at night when the workers need to go pick maybe tomatoes in the morning. It means production is affected. But if we do have a system of recruitment that ensures that there's consistent supply of labor as and when the plantations requires it. So this is my experience in Southern Africa, and this is what I think can be done to reduce vulnerabilities associated with mobility for labor, especially in the agriculture sector.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.